The alarm on my wrist buzzed hard enough to sting, and Voss grabbed my arm before I could even stand up. "Do not move," he whispered. "It is above us." I froze the way he wanted me to, but my eyes were already tracking the shadow sliding across the canopy of blue leaves. 6 legs, a body long as a transport pod, claws that could open a hull plate like a tin can. The Valkyrie had told us about this thing during orientation. They called it a driftclaw. They said it was the reason their species never settled this valley in 10,000 years. Voss was shaking. I was thinking about how much meat was probably on those hind legs. We had landed on Kest Prime 4 days earlier, part of a small exchange team sent to study farming methods on a world that had never needed to farm much, because almost everything wild there was either poison or predator. The Valkyrie were careful people, graceful, intelligent, deeply allergic to risk. Their entire civilization was built around staying small, staying quiet, and never drawing attention from anything with teeth. Voss was our liaison, a Valkyrie with soft gray skin and eyes like dark water, and he had spent the whole first day walking us through a list of animals we were never, under any circumstances, supposed to approach. There was the driftclaw, which hunted by scent and rarely missed. There was the sawtail, a river creature with a jaw that could snap a canoe in half. There was the emberwing, a flying hunter that dropped from high altitude and struck before you even heard the wind change. And there was the hollow fox, small, quick, and according to Voss, the most feared animal on the entire planet, because it hunted in packs of 30 and coordinated like a single mind. I remember sitting there with my notebook, nodding along, and then asking the only question that mattered to me. Which ones taste good? Voss looked at me the way you look at someone who just licked a live wire for fun. "Taste," he said. "You want to know how they taste?" I told him yes, obviously, because if something has muscle and fat and blood, humans have historically found a way to put it on a plate. He explained, slowly, like I might not have understood him the first time, that these were apex predators. Things that killed you, not things you invited to dinner. I told him that on my planet, we ate several animals that used to eat us first, and one of them was so aggressive that fishing crews still lost fingers to it, and we still called it a delicacy. Voss did not sleep well that night. I heard him pacing outside my tent. So now here we were, 4 days later, flattened against a rock, while a driftclaw the size of a shuttle drifted overhead on legs that barely made a sound. Voss's breathing had gone shallow and fast. I kept still, watching the pattern of its steps, the way its head tilted when it caught a new scent, the rhythm of its hunting. It was beautiful, honestly. Terrifying, but beautiful. When it finally moved off toward the ridge, Voss exhaled like he had been holding his breath for a year. "We should return to camp," he said, immediately. I told him I had a better idea. He did not like my better idea. My better idea was simple. If the driftclaw hunted by scent, then scent could be used against it. If it had a blind spot behind its head, which Voss himself had mentioned during the safety briefing while trying to scare me, then that blind spot was also an opportunity. Every predator that hunts alone has a weakness, because evolution never builds a perfect killer. It builds a killer that is good enough for its environment. Humans had spent our entire history exploiting exactly that kind of weakness, and we were still here to talk about it. Voss asked me if humans were always this reckless. I told him no, we were usually more organized about it. This was just improvising. We returned to camp, where the rest of the team, Grace and Nathan, were setting up the scanning equipment for the soil survey. I explained what I had seen. Grace, who had grown up hunting on the eastern plains back home, immediately wanted details on the driftclaw's stride length and reaction time. Nathan, always the quiet one, started calculating wind patterns for the valley, based on the readings we had already logged. Voss stood there watching 3 humans plan a hunting expedition for an animal his entire species had spent 10,000 years avoiding. "You cannot be serious," he said. I told him we absolutely were. He argued for almost an hour. He brought up statistics, historical incidents, 3 separate stories about Velkari scouting parties that had vanished near driftclaw territory. Grace listened patiently, then asked him a single question. Had any of those parties ever tried to fight back, or had they all just run? Voss admitted they had always run. That, Grace said, was the difference. We spent the next day building a plan instead of rushing in. That part mattered. This was not about bravado, it was about respect for something dangerous, paired with the confidence that dangerous did not mean unbeatable. We studied the driftclaw's hunting pattern from a distance, using the drone Nathan had brought for terrain mapping. We learned it preferred the narrow ravines where sound bounced strangely, probably because prey there could not tell which direction danger was coming from. We learned it rested near a stream bed during the hottest part of the day, when its body temperature needed to drop. Voss watched all of this with growing unease, but he also started taking notes. I noticed that. He was scared, but he was also curious, and curiosity is a very human weakness to have, even if you are not human. On the 3rd day, we moved. The plan was straightforward. Grace and I would use scent decoys made from local plant oils, mixed with a compound that mimicked the smell of the driftclaw's usual prey, to draw it away from the open ridge and into a narrower channel where its size would work against it. Nathan would monitor from a higher position with a signal flare in case anything went wrong. Voss insisted on coming, not because he wanted to, but because he said if we were foolish enough to do this, he needed to see it with his own eyes so his people would believe him. I respected that. The driftclaw came exactly where we expected, drawn by the scent trail, moving fast and low through the ravine. Its speed was breathtaking, honestly. For a moment, even I felt my chest tighten, because knowing a plan should work and watching a 6-legged predator the size of a transport vehicle sprint toward you are 2 very different experiences. Grace held her position until the last possible second, then triggered the second decoy behind it, forcing it to slow and turn in the tight space. That hesitation was all we needed. The narrow rock walls limited its stride, took away the one advantage it had over everything else in that valley, which was open ground and momentum. What followed was not some heroic battle. It was quick, careful, and over faster than Voss expected. We used tools, not raw strength. We used the terrain, not luck. When it was done, Voss stood frozen at the edge of the ravine, staring at the animal his people had feared for 10,000 years, now still on the ground in front of 3 humans who were already discussing how best to process the meat for cooking. He asked me quietly if I felt anything. I told him yes. Relief, mostly. And hunger. That night we cooked driftclaw meat over an open fire, and Voss watched us eat it, like he was watching something forbidden happen right in front of him. Eventually, hesitantly, he tried a small piece himself. His expression changed almost immediately. "It is good," he admitted, sounding almost betrayed by his own taste buds. Grace told him that was usually how it went. Word of what happened spread through the Velkari settlement faster than I expected. Within a week, elders were requesting meetings, not about farming techniques anymore, but about how humans thought about danger. Voss became something of a local celebrity for having witnessed it firsthand, and he seemed both proud and deeply unsettled by that fact. A few days later, the regional council asked if we would be willing to document our methods, not to hunt every dangerous animal on the planet, but to understand which threats could actually be managed, instead of simply avoided forever. It was a small shift, but a real one. Fear that had shaped an entire civilization for 10,000 years was being re-examined because 3 tired humans decided a monster looked like dinner. Voss found me packing equipment near the end of our stay and asked if all humans were like this, or if our team had simply been unusual. I told him honestly that we were fairly average, by human standards. He sat with that for a long moment, then said something I still think about. He said his people had spent their entire history asking how to survive the world around them. Watching us, he realized we had spent hours asking how to live alongside it, and sometimes, how to eat it. I laughed, because it was true, and because it summed up the entire trip better than any report I could write. Before we left Kest Prime, Voss handed me a small data tablet containing an updated version of the original safety briefing. He had added a new section at the end, written in careful, formal language, clearly uncomfortable for him to include. It was titled, in the driest tone possible, Notes on Edibility. I told him that was the best compliment his species could have given us. He did not seem entirely sure that was a compliment at all, but he smiled anyway, in that quiet Velkari way, before we boarded the shuttle home.